Hi, welcome back to another episode of Creating Creative Chaos. And today I'd like to talk about static defenses, specifically on planets in the near future science fiction. Um, so when I first say static defenses, I think the kind of initial reaction for people is to say like, yeah, well, that's so World War One. That's old school stuff. We don't really have a need for that anymore. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of a fairly accurate take on it. I mean, in World War II with blitzkrieg warfare, the infamous uselessness of the Maginot Line in France, for example. Um, and now, even more so, you've got nuclear missiles, you've got uh, drones, jet fighters, bombers that can go across the entire globe. So it may seem that there's actually no use for static defenses anymore. They're a waste of time and money, essentially useless at defending whatever you want to defend. But the more I think about it, the more I think that that's actually inaccurate. I think that there is actually a use for static defenses. By static defenses, I'm talking about minefields, fortifications, et cetera, et cetera. Um, And the reason I think that is because of a pretty specific conflict that we seem to be having in the world right now. Um, First off, the whole idea of forever wars. These are wars that drag on for years, decades, generations, maybe even at this point, where the two sides are able to keep fighting and unwilling to make any sort of peace with whoever they're fighting with. And these wars, specifically these wars that take place between two countries that are geographically either next to each other or really close to each other. And I think probably the best examples of these grinding forever war conflicts, I think right now is obviously Ukraine-Russia war, and Lebanon, the Israel fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Heck, even the North-South Korean border, that's a war that's been going on for generations. There's an armistice, there's not an official peace there yet. Maybe another one would be Sudan, places like that. But anyway, these are areas that are, the two combatants are geographically close to each other, and they're just grinding conflicts. No real end in sight, either one of them. And if you've got a war like that, I think static defenses actually could play a role in that. Um, and but I'm not talking about specific, like the old school static defenses, which are like minefields and fortifications and stuff like that, machine gun nests. Um, the more I was looking at specifically the Ukraine conflict, the more I was thinking like, drones actually, rather than overcoming, making static defenses obsolete, might actually be useful when combined into a static defense to defending territory. So with that in mind, I came up with a concept of what I call minefields. And I don't mean them in obviously the old sense of where you just bury things in the ground, or, explosives in the ground, wait for like a person or a tank to drive over it, and then boom, game over. Although those certainly are included. But when I was writing the Regnum Humanitas and the Praetorian Lexiconum books, I came up with a concept called a minefield. That's a capital M. And this would be, again, like I said, an area between two combatants that are geographically close to each other. In the case of the two um, works I'm talking or worlds I'm talking about there, these were packs. This is like um, future Earth was divided up between packs, which PACTS, which are basically socio political, military, economic um, alliances, sort of like NATO, but if NATO was actually unified militarily and economically and all that. So it's not the UN, but it's basically geographically selected areas that are unified by the same foreign policies, economies, et cetera, militaries, et cetera, et cetera. And anytime these pacts bordered each other, there was basically an endless grinding conflict going on. The big one would be between, in my world, is between the European Union and the coalition, which is you know, an alliance with China and a lot of the Asian countries and stuff. And so on these borders, they created what are called minefields. And these are basically strips of no man's land, you know, anywhere from 10 kilometers to, you know, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, however wide they can do, that are basically heavily mined. But then most importantly, they're also patrolled by drones and robotic units and actually studded with automated gun turrets, automated machine guns. And you know, and even automated missile turrets to take out, you know, flying drones, and buried hangars, which are basically full of flying drones, which they can launch anytime they see an incursion. So what you've got is a heavily militarized, deadly zone between these two combatants that are fighting forever wars. Very limited human very limited number of humans and soldiers that are actually there. And those that are basically buried in, you know, subterranean, hidden, fortified bunkers. And they're there basically to monitor the zone and make sure that the robots aren't wandering onto the wrong side and all that stuff. So you've still got this endless series of conflicts and, artillery barrages back and forth, but a lot of it's just being fought, between automated units, robotic units. So the humans and the societies on either side, it's very easy to forget about. And you can kind of see that happening, that same sort of mindset happening in Ukraine right now, where maybe see it heading that way, where they've got human soldiers that they sent up there, but they're basically hiding and trying to fly drones and intercepting drones and all these sorts of things. And I think there's actually a move right now to start controlling territory by putting in automated weapon systems like automated machine guns, for example. Because when you think about it, if you really want to control the land, you have limited numbers of soldiers. In Ukraine's case, and increasingly, I would say Russia's case. If you have an automated machine gun position set up there, you could probably do a pretty good job of denying the enemy that specific area if you wanted to. But again, assuming they don't take it out with, like, say, a drone, in which case you take out their drone, etc. You get the idea. Again, you also have, explosives that are buried there because that's kind of standard area denial weapon. But I genuinely see this as being something that's probably where we're headed in the future, especially on these borders where you've got these forever wars going on, like say North, South Korea, Lebanon, Ukraine, Russia. So yeah, consider, if you're doing any sort of military science fiction, don't totally discount static defenses, because I do think that there's, depending on how far in the future you're going, it's probably going to be something that we'll be dealing with for years, and seems to be the future of where we're heading for warfare, at least right now. You also might want to consider, for plot purposes, just how dangerous it is to have all these highly automated weapon systems on kind of a razor's edge, knife's edge of readiness, right next to each other. And I'm not going to spoil you about what happens in the Praetorian Lexiconum world or Regnum Humanitas world. They're kind of the same one. But yeah, so consider that and think about it. And I think my next episode, maybe in a week or two, I'll start talking about maybe aquatic warfare, specifically as it relates to drones, and how maybe you could write about that in science fiction. Well, thank you, and hope you all have a good and have enjoyed this, and have a good day.